So hello, guys. So we are back, myself and Lucy, and today probably a little more Dsetu than what we had last time. Um, the format today will be, I think, we'll lay a little foundation, and then Lucy and Dsetu and I, to whatever degree I'm become part of this today, will have a conversation moving forward. Then, so I guess I'm going to relax into this a little bit and let some of those other parts of us step forward. So once again, we would greet all of you and express again our deep appreciation for the opportunity to interact with all of you in this way. So we thought we would begin today by sharing some information that to many of you may be foundational. We wanted to touch on perhaps maybe some misunderstandings that some may have in this regard. And this is in association with beliefs and how beliefs are utilized in the reality that you are now exploring. So, of course, as the self, as all that is, as your expression of all that is, you have infinite dimensions of yourself. And of course, you're exploring all of those dimensions of yourself. This particular physical dimension being one of those dimensions that you're exploring. Now, each of those dimensions, this dimension included, has particular ideas that you're exploring as part of that dimension of exploration. This particular physical reality utilizes what you term beliefs and belief systems. They are integral to the dimension. You utilize these with everything that you do in the dimension. They are sometimes quite foundational. Sometimes you may not even recognize that it's a belief that you're talking about. The idea that there is a physical reality is a belief. The idea that you are on a planet is a belief. The idea of land masses and waters are beliefs. The air that you believe is a belief. The body that you walk around in is the manifestation of consciousness of a belief. Language is a belief. Putting energy into your body in the form of food or whatever else it may be is a belief. There are many, many ideas that you utilize as belief systems and beliefs within the dimension that you're exploring. Now, there are also categories of beliefs that are much more malleable. A belief in what it means to be a man, a belief in what it means to be a woman, a belief in what it means to be married, a belief in how a job and you interact together, a belief in what it means to be of a particular gender. So there are many other types of beliefs that are part of this dimension that are much more malleable. In other words, they can be used in a whole variety of ways. Now, as individuals have explored the deeper parts of themselves in association with this dimension, some individuals believe that what you will do as you're doing that is you will divest yourself of beliefs. This is not what will occur. What will occur is you will move to a place where you will be able to choose the beliefs that you are using in any moment as you express yourself within this dimension. You will always use beliefs within this dimension. Now, some of those you won't worry about changing. You are not going to change the idea that there is gravity on your planet. You're not going to change the belief that you breathe air on your planet. You're not going to change the belief that your bodies basically look as they do right now, not at this time anyway. There will be many things, many beliefs that are more or less foundational beliefs. You don't have to worry about those. Those work in the background, shall we say. The other ones, the more malleable ones, those are the ones that are there for you to play with. But you will not divest yourself of even those beliefs. You may discontinue using some of those, or you may use them in different ways. But you are not getting rid of beliefs as you explore and change this dimension of your reality. And you knew this as you decided to explore this particular dimension, that this dimension incorporated beliefs as part of the dimension. So because we know that there is some confusion about that in the layers of individuals who explore these types of things, we just wanted to touch on this subject matter a little bit with all of you. Beyond that, we wanted to talk a little bit, we thought we would chat a little bit about the idea of being present, being in the now. And in particular, your interactions with situations or other individuals. So, because you are so very used to the idea of a flow of time, because within your experience, particularly before you began these explorations, the idea of past, which flowed into a now, which then becomes a future, is an idea that is quite common to you. There's nothing wrong with that idea or bad with that idea, but you're coming to understand that idea in a different way. So when you have, let's say, an individual in front of you that you have had, maybe we'll say historically, a particular type of an interaction with, in that moment, you have the opportunity to, if you want to, disregard what you call history in that moment and treat the individual that's in front of you as a brand new version of that individual. If you can do that, you can then reap the benefits of your being able to do that. And of course, in this, we're not necessarily so much discussing individuals that you've had very pleasant interactions with, but more of those individuals that you've had more challenging interactions with. Because, of course, what you may understand is that the words that you heard from that individual, the attitude that was expressed by that individual, was actually created by you. You created your version of the individual. You created the words that came out of their mouth. You created the type of energy that was coming from them in your experience of reality. And so if you can disregard the history that you have with that individual, if you can understand that the interaction that you're about to have with this individual is very much about who you are and where you are in your understanding of yourself, in your acceptance of who you are in that moment, then your interaction with this individual will reflect that. And that's regardless of what they're doing in their reality. In their reality, there may be conflict. That makes no difference. You get to choose how you configure consciousness in your reality, in the way that you're interacting with that individual. And these differences sometimes can be quite profound with individuals. You see these things many times. You might be maybe walking on a walkway or in a park on a nature walk with a group of friends, let's say. And after the walk, you're all back in somebody's house, and one of you comments on how warm of a day it was. Another you comments on actually it was quite chilly that day. Somebody else comments how it felt actually quite pleasant that day. Someone might comment on all the birds that they heard singing that day. Somebody else commented on, well, what they heard was a bunch of children around. They didn't hardly hear any birds, right? You so much believe that you're having the same experience that everybody else is having around you, but you're not. You're creating your own experience all the time. Now, yes, there are many similarities that are frequently there between you and others that you are, quote unquote, sharing an experience with. But at the same time, that experience is unique to you. And so in an understanding of that, and in an understanding of the reflective nature of your reality, you can make those experiences that you're having with those individuals in your life that are a little bit more challenging, or have been, shall we say, within the concept of time, been more challenging for you, something completely different. It really is up to you, right? Your state of mind, or as others may say, your vibrational state, right? What is it you allow yourself to perceive in that individual, maybe we'll say, actually more in yourself in that moment? And so that's the foundation that we kind of wanted to lay today. And we know that all of you, of course, have your spokespersons, shall we say, in our collaborator here, Lucy. And so we'll pause in this moment and see how maybe Lucy might like to approach the ideas that we've just presented.
Let's start at the beginning, which was the goal is not to divest yourself of beliefs, but rather to choose them. What are some beliefs that you are finding humans are, well, spiritual beings currently incarnated in human form? What are the beliefs you're finding really serve people well?
One of the things that your social media has allowed is so much more interaction with individuals. As you will call it, incarnate yourself within this particular dimension. One of the things that you have set up for yourselves is you have allowed yourselves to be very influenceable by those around you, especially prior to you opening up to more of who you are, to more awareness of that. So the growth in your social medias has allowed you to be in contact with many more individuals who talk of themselves as the self, as the soul. That influence has allowed individuals to shift the way that they think about themselves, to not just see themselves as the flesh and blood human being, to consider themselves as something else. That consideration began to open doorways for all of you. Now, this happened before that, but this influx of technology has allowed that movement within all of you to grow at a very quick rate, because you're now interacting and being influenced by many more individuals. So the very idea that you, in fact, are more than just the physical body that you're walking around with, and that becoming more real to you, has begun to open many doors within you. That's one of the most powerful things that you've done.
That's beautiful. As you discussed the creation of another, including creating the words out of their mouth. I'm curious if you'd like to say a little bit more about that. I think that that's confusing for a lot of people because it makes it sound like I'm responsible for everything and you don't have free will. So how do you work your way around that conception?
So let's start with the free will aspect of that. The understanding that you are the one making the choices within, in particular, this time period that can be called the transition time period, some called your shifting time period, however you want to label it. That understanding very much, we will suggest, hinges on a deeper understanding of who and what you are. Again, you have considered yourselves to be just the body for, in historical times, a very long period of time. Now, of course, these understandings do move in long cycles, and you're moving into one of those cycles again. But as you become increasingly aware of what you actually are, you will move beyond the concept of thinking that you are at odds with some part of you that's creating your experience and some part of you that's a victim of that creation, because you will understand that there is no delineation between that you. You are both of those yous. You are the you that's much more involved in the actual manipulation of consciousness in an aware way. This aspect of you just doesn't understand how involved it is in that process. As individuals become increasingly aware of them as that them, they will slowly let go of thinking in those terms. But it's like anything else. If I sit down to play the piano for the first week or the first half of a year, I may not consider myself a pianist at all. I may consider myself somebody who's sitting at this instrument trying to learn this instrument. And it may be difficult. I may be hitting the wrong keys many times, right? I may be frustrated at not being able to play the way that I want to play, right? It's a process. It takes a little bit of time to be able to play that instrument so that you can walk up to the instrument and now you feel that you and the instrument are one. You are no longer at odds with the instrument any longer. This exploration of self is quite similar. You are unfamiliar with the rest of who you are in the beginning. As the process unfolds, as it begins to blossom, you become increasingly familiar with what that is. And it becomes now much more, we're going to use the word real for you. Because prior to that, it's an idea. But many things in your existence are like this. We're going to use a subject matter that some people might find a little touchy. But we're going to use it because it is such a strong example of the ideas of something versus the experience of something. And that is sex. When you're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, whatever might happen to be, before you've involved yourself physically with the sexual experience, you may hear from your friends what sex is like. You may read about sex. You may watch movies about sex, many things, but you still don't know the experience. When you finally have the experience, then you know for you what that experience is like. Now, you're interacting with that experience from a completely different space, in a completely different way than what you did before, just hearing the information about what that experience might be like. Becoming you is the same thing. There's a lot of information. There's lots of ideas. There's lots of theories. There's lots of conversations that you may involve yourself in. It's when you begin to explore and open the doors to who you actually are and to allow that experience into this experience that then you actually begin to understand what it's all about. From that place, some of the ways that you consider things will fade away, and they will no longer be important to you because you will understand the true nature of who and what you actually are.
A creator.
Creator, yes. And a creator from this vantage point that doesn't understand how integrated it is to that process. And once you become increasingly aware of who you actually are, you will understand there are no dividers between what in the moment we'll call this you and the rest of you. It's just you. You just don't understand that yet. And so you create these ideas because of your experiences that say that somehow you sometimes get the short end of the stick. But that's not actually the way that it works. Imagine an individual who graduates, we'll say, from college and decides to go out and to work for the Red Cross in another country, someplace, or some similar organization, the Salvation Army, whatever it might happen to be, right? And the country that they chose to go to at the time was relatively peaceful. And then 2 weeks before they were supposed to leave, a lot of unrest came up in the country. But they still went. They had that appointment to go, and they go into that country not knowing what they're going to find, right? And they get themselves into that mix, and they have all the experiences that they have there. And those experiences are much more tongue-in-cheek, we'll call them exciting, than they would have been in the other scenario, right? But they learn so much more about themselves by being in that type of environment than they would have in a much more placid environment. That is much like the reality that you find yourself in right now. You can also think of the individuals who landed on the east coast of your United States and went out to explore the country towards the west, not knowing anything about what lay before them. This is similar to what you're doing here also. Yes, you're exploring dimensions of yourself, but you're creating these dimensions so that they can be explored in a way that it's new to you as you explore it. And so in order to do that, you need to set yourself up in a way that the exploration does seem real to you, that these ideas and concepts are not something that you're familiar with like you are from the part of you that is back observing everything that's going on, that knows much more about how the whole production works out. And you understand that when you get into the exploration. So if you're involved in one of these time periods where the shifting occurs, as you become increasingly familiar with yourself, you will begin once again to understand those things about yourself. And your ideas about those things will shift and change because of that awareness.
I agree with you that a lot of people now are very much feeling themselves as human and divine and wanting that blended experience, but struggling to obtain it, so to speak. What do you recommend?
To persevere. Again, we understand, of course, that there are many individuals who have lived, and again, we'll use the word historically, in time periods where the ways that civilizations thought about life were hard. The world was a challenging place to be in. You had to approach it in particular ways. And so as all of you begin to move into a different way of expressing yourselves, these ideas are still quite prevalent in many of the individuals that, quote unquote, populate your world. And so individuals will still approach life as if it's the individual against the world, right? As if it's a fight for survival and the things that need to occur because that's what life is about. That idea is still woven through the fabric of what all of you are doing here. Now, many individuals are seeing beyond that, but many individuals yet do not. You know that because of the stories that you see if you watch your news programs or you read your newspapers or whatever it might happen to be. Many people still struggle in those regards. Now, understand that creation is infinite. And if you've explored these ideas to some degree, you understand the idea of probable realities. So even, let's say, 100 years in our future, you may live in an environment that is now quite a peaceful environment, that the planet has changed immensely. But as you have that experience, you also know that there are probable Earths out there that are much different than that, where war and strife is a common way that things are expressed on that particular Earth. And then there are many mixes of that as well. And so as on this particular model of your planet, speaking in terms of a flow of time, as this opportunity to become increasingly aware of yourself has presented itself to all of you, there is still choice. There's always been choice. And so what you're getting the opportunity to do is to observe choice. In what you might call your 1950s and your 1960s and even your 1970s, as you looked around in your environment, you would see that many more people were making similar choices. Choices seemed to be of the same theme, by and large. As your 80s and your 90s, and especially your new millennium came into effect, there are more and more choices to make in many, many, many different ways. This is because you're opening the doors to who and what you are, where choice resides. So as you choose, you're going to have an effect, and others have mentioned this, where you're not just going to see what seems to be one probable Earth around you. You're going to see various probable Earths around you. The concept then is to focus on how you want to express yourself. It has always been the case, actually, that the version of Earth that you find yourself on is associated with your choices to be there. In the past, quote unquote, those choices have largely been made by those deeper aspects of you. Still you, but by those deeper aspects of you. In this time period, those choices are coming to the surface, shall we say. Now, the seemingly physically focused you is able to make those choices more and more all the time, because that's the window that you've all opened for yourself, is to be able to, in this time period, become familiar with more of who you are. And in that, you have many more choices. So, of course, do others around you. A number of those individuals will not make the same choices that you're making. If you understand that within the infinite nature of all that is, all things are being played out. And within that, there are many different versions of Earth. And in this time period, you're going to see those versions of Earth, some of those versions of Earth, side by side, as you continue to choose yours. Eventually, what's going to happen is that more and more you will see mostly the version that you're choosing. So what's important is for you to make the choices you want to make, for the choices and for the reasons that you want to make those choices. To go into your heart, to recognize the beliefs and the definitions that may have colored your life in the past, and to choose, do you want to continue to use those types of beliefs and definitions as you move forward, or do you want to use different ones as you move forward? You're still going to be using beliefs and definitions. Which would you like to use? How do you want to consider yourself? What experiences will you allow yourself to have in your life? Because again, as you move forward, those experiences will help you to know more of who and what you are. So the more experience that you can allow that's different from what you allowed into your life before this, the more opportunity you will have to have experiences that help you to know more of who you are. It makes your transition easier in that regard.
What you just described harkens to the many people who have talked about, quote, the new earth. But what I just heard you say is there will be many versions of the new earth.
There already are, in fact. You're not aware presently because of the way you've seemingly segregated yourself from the rest of what you are as self. You're not familiar with all the probable expressions that are out there. As you open yourself up to more of who you are, those things now become part of your perception, and you will see them around you. Again, part of your experience as self is unending choice. That experience will become more and more of this experience. As you know yourself as more of yourself, your capabilities increase. You are able to have more choices at your disposal because you're able to reach into those choices in ways that you weren't able to before, when you were more sequestered from your awareness of who and what you are. So this is a natural part of this process for you. Nobody has suggested to you at any time, even individuals thousands of years ago, that all this was going to occur without bumps in the road. Nobody has ever suggested to you that it was going to be smooth sailing, because there was much for you to discover about yourselves as you transitioned through this time period. So the bumps will be there. Look to each other to support each other.
And that's not just a belief that the bumps will be there.
Well, beliefs do come into play in that, because you can move beyond those, but at the same time, your existence as a self is about experience. And so from this perspective, many times we can say we would rather have another experience because we don't necessarily think we would like that kind of experience, where from that particular position, you may not understand, quote unquote, the growth that comes from having that experience, the insight that comes from having the experience, the greater depth of sharing that comes from having that experience. And so there are many layers of choice and how choice flows and comes to a point in this reality. If you can trust that those deeper parts of who you are, that wider awareness of you, which is just you, knows what it's doing with this reality, and pay attention to the guidance that you're getting from that aspect of yourself, which we know is a process. It's not what you're used to doing. Many of you will be challenged greatly by being able to do that, and that's understandable. There's nothing wrong with that. You've lived historically in a time period historically where you believed that this personality, the name that you call yourself, and all of the events that you believe are part of who you are, is what it is that guides your movement through life. When really, that's never been the case. That you is the part of you that's experienced all those things. But before you became increasingly aware of who and what you are, it hasn't been the part of you that's created those movements. Have you directed those movements in particular ways and utilized beliefs to do that? Yes. But pulling all of that together has historically been the purview of other parts of yourself. In this shift, you're taking more and more and more of that, shall we say, upon your own shoulders. because you're becoming aware of the you whose, maybe we'll phrase it, natural job is to be doing all of that.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier that there's a question and a choice for us about what we allow ourselves to perceive about another person, especially a person who may feel like a challenge. Can you say more about that? How we allow ourselves to perceive or not certain things about another?
Yes. So, of course, there's a variety of ways that you could approach this. You could approach it by simply saying that you would rather live a life that is not as filled with conflict and drama as what it has been before. And you can choose, when those individuals approach you in that particular way, to interact with that individual in a way that does not grow the conflict that could be there, does not bring that into a more dramatic place. You could approach it simply like that. That's a valid way to do it. You can look at it a little bit more deeply if you wanted to. You can understand that this individual shows up in your existence as an opportunity to understand some of the maybe default ways that you may still be utilizing beliefs and definitions as you interact, as you collaborate with that more aware part of you to bring your experience into existence. From that perspective, what opportunity does that individual provide to you as they come to you with whatever it is that they're verbally expressing to you, or whatever situation or circumstance you find yourself in? What opportunity is there for you to understand? What of the ideas that you've been exposed to, as an individual has explored these ideas, and many individuals have shared these particular ideas, what of those awarenesses of how you would like to express yourself in that moment are applicable to that moment? How would you like to reach in and respond or react? Of course, it's up to you, but we would just respond to the way that that person has just presented what it is that it presented to you. If you allow yourself to pause for just a couple of seconds, there's no need to answer immediately to anybody. Give yourself a moment or two to ask yourself that question within. Why is this person in front of me? Take that vantage point, the exploratory vantage point. Attempt not to make it about defense. Ask yourself, why are they here? What are they here for me right now? What is the opportunity for me right now? What is the greater awareness I could have about me right now within this situation? It only takes a moment. If you can shift to that direction, and in that, if you can have an understanding that that's what it's there for, and your emotional state will give you some insight into how you're doing there. And it's not really a gauge of how good or bad you're doing, right? It's just an indication. It's only information for you about what there is left to explore within yourself. And even if in that moment you can't do that, in the 3-4 minutes after that, or the half hour after that, or the 4 hours after that, or the end of the day, if you can revisit that experience, and at that time, explore that experience and see, how could have I expressed myself in a different way in that experience? You've gained from that experience. If you can do it in the moment, great. If you can't, you have a better ability, a greater chance, shall we say, that the next time something like that happens, you will be more equipped, maybe we'll say, to be able to respond different in that moment. And even if it doesn't work in that moment, if again you revisit it and you figure out what was going on within you, because it's always about you, it's always about the things that you may believe you have yet to defend, you may believe are yet shortcomings within you, which of course there can't possibly be, but you haven't realized those things yet. So it's always about self-exploration. It's always about knowing yourself more. And so at whatever pace you can do that, you will at some point get to the place that when individuals come to you and they have a particular expression like that, it may even be just as a test for yourself to see in this moment, how will I respond to an individual coming to me in some sort of a challenged way? And when you reach the place, when they do that, and you're totally able to make a choice about how you want to respond, then you know those parts of yourself now much more deeply than what you did before. And again, neither of those ways is right or wrong. They're all part of the exploration. It's really just about what experience would you rather have and what's the path to get there.
That was a beautiful, beautiful answer. Thank you. I'm wondering if this would be a good time to shift gears and perhaps we could have a little conversation about you, Dsetu.
We love talking about ourselves.
Right. Well, for people who are listening to this, maybe if it's possible for you to describe yourself or selves,
We
could you
will
do?
attempt to. And we will begin with something that may sound a little enigmatic. We are what you are. We are an expression of spirit, of consciousness. In fact, as Chuck has expressed a number of times in various venues, we are a group, actually. We are not an individual. Most of this information is filtered, maybe we'll put it, through what maybe we could call either the higher self of Chuck, the higher mind of Chuck, the soul perspective of Chuck, however you would like to say it. And those other aspects of consciousness are just other layers of that same being. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other expressions of consciousness in whatever expansive way you might want to think about them that aren't also expressed as personalities. It's just that the manner in which those personalities are expressed are a little different than how you express personality within this particular exploration. We'll also suggest to you that consciousness does not know itself in a bubble. Consciousness knows itself as it reflects itself to other expressions of consciousness. As a result of that, you will find that consciousness explores itself in what we might call groups. This is typical, actually. You will find that regardless of what it is that you do, whether you like to read, whether you like to play music, whether you like to do art, whether you like to explore spiritual things, whether you like to swim, whether you like to hike, whatever it might happen to be, that typically you will gravitate to others who are exploring similarly. This happens throughout consciousness. So we as a group of consciousness, we explore similarly in certain threads and in diverse ways in others. It all lends to our exploration. So, of course, many of us are associated with the exploration of what you call physical dimensions of reality. In that, several of our group have what we'll call incarnations within those types of dimensions, and specifically within your physical dimension. The individual that seems to be sitting in front of the camera in front of you being one of them. This, of course, provides us with information about the dimension itself, because without an expression of us within the dimension, we don't have information about the mechanics of the dimension. We don't know the ins and outs of the dimension. This particular soul, shall we say this, more accurately, perhaps, this oversoul expresses itself in many, many, many incarnations in this physical dimension. It knows this dimension quite well. It, shall we say, reaches out into consciousness to invite other aspects of consciousness to explore this particular dimension. It acts as a type of guide, is not quite the correct word, but somebody who, maybe if you could think in terms of somebody who might show someone a video about, let's say, an island they may go to visit, and the things that occur on that island, the type of weather they may experience, all the things to do on that island. It's something similar to that, only within consciousness. We give them a taste of the dimension so that they can choose whether to explore that dimension for themselves if they would like to. So, because of the number of incarnations that this particular oversoul has here, one of the expressions that's natural for various expressions of that oversoul, various souls, and then various physical expressions, is to share the information about the changes that happen within that dimension, because we're very familiar with all the probable ways that this particular, maybe we'll say, planet expresses itself. And so we do this in many time periods. We have our favorites. In fact, this is one of them. And in that, as we reach out to individuals in a collaborative way, some of those individuals are individuals that we also collaborate with in what you would call other time periods, as we share this information in either similar or dissimilar ways, depending on the civilizations that we're in. So that's a little about who we are.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Quite welcome.
So we are at a time frame now, in a time frame that probably encourages wrapping up. If there's more you'd like to say.
We feel similarly about that. So the one thing that we think we would say as we come to the end of this incredible time that we've shared with all of you is to trust the communication that comes from the rest of you, to understand that it is the rest of you, that if you could think of the you right now, today, and then go back and think of the you several days ago. And whatever challenges that you had several days ago, and whatever help that you know at this moment would make as much difference as it possibly could to be able to send that you information about. We just want you to know that those deeper parts of you are doing just that all the time. All you need to do is put yourself in a position to have that become part of your experience. Because deeper you would love you to experience your experience in as satisfying and fulfilling a way as you possibly can. It has no desire for things to be more challenging for you than, we'll say, in multiple layers, you've chosen for them to be. And sometimes you do choose for them to be challenging, but many, many times it does not need to be as challenging as what you make it. And if you can just trust that the rest of you has your back and will send you the information to guide you in your journey. And if you can work with that trust, and if you can take action on those things, you will see the benefits of doing that in your exploration. So we would leave you with that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.